Kansas Territory, late August 1872. The sun was just breaking the horizon when Gideon Walker found her, crumpled among the cornrows, her skirts caught in brittle stalks, her face pale as fresh cream. He'd been carrying morning water to the western field, dust rising with each step, when he saw her at the row's edge, still as death. Her arms were tucked in like a sleeping child's. The bucket hit the ground with a thud. "Hey, miss," he called, hurrying to her side, his heart hammering. No response. Her breaths were faint, lips cracked like parched earth. Kneeling, he brushed back her straw-blonde hair, damp strands clinging to her fevered skin. "Miss, you hear me?" Her eyelids twitched, barely. Careful not to shake her, he lifted her slight frame, too light, burning hot against his flannel, and carried her past the barn, across the porch, into his shadowed house. He laid her on the spare room's cot, fetching cool well water and pressing the cup to her lips. She stirred, sipping weakly. "You're all right," he murmured. "Safe now." 2 hours passed before she could sit up. When her eyes opened fully, they were soft green, hazy at first, then locking onto his. Sarah felt and locked onto him. "Where am I?" Her voice rasped. "My farm," Gideon said. "You collapsed in my cornfield." She blinked, taking in the plain room. Wood walls, braided rug, wash basin by the window. "I was walking a long time," she said. "Name?" he asked. She nodded faintly. "Geneva Whitlaw." He dipped his head. "Gideon Walker." She glanced at her hands. "Didn't mean to trespass. Had nowhere else." He pulled a chair closer. "You hungry?" She nodded. He brought bread, soft cheese, and pears from the cellar. She ate slowly, as if relearning strength. "I'll work for it," she said, plate empty. "Don't take charity." "You don't owe me," he replied, "but I won't stop you helping." Her eyes dropped, a faint nod. In the morning light, she looked worn but unbroken, fragile yet enduring. Geneva slept through the next night and most of the morning. Gideon kept busy, mending the east pasture fence, checking water lines, feeding chickens, but his mind wandered to the woman in his house. By day 3, she was up, moving slowly through the kitchen, fingers grazing the counter like an anchor. "You live alone?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Since Pa died 2 winters back?" She nodded, silent. "You?" he ventured. "Parents died in Missouri. Worked at a boarding house, but it wasn't safe. I left." Her words carried weight, but she didn't meet his eyes. He didn't press. Instead, he pointed out the window. "Land goes a mile east. Corn, wheat, barn needs patching before snow. You worked fields?" "Helped my pa before we lost our farm," she said. He smiled faintly. "You'll spot blight better than me." By the next week, Geneva settled into the farm's rhythm. Up before dawn, she worked beside Gideon, sleeves rolled, hair tied, mending posts, cleaning tools, cutting corn by hand. Her frame strengthened with food and sun, her gaze steady when it met his. One afternoon on the porch, dirt-streaked and sweat-cooled, she turned to him. "Why you alone?" He looked over the fields. "Just happened. Thought I'd marry, raise a family. War took the men. Women followed the rails east. I stayed." His voice softened. "Got used to quiet." Geneva tucked hair behind her ear. "Some quiet's better than painful noise." He nodded, watching her. By mid-September, the corn stood tall. Geneva moved through the rows with care, her hands sure, touching the earth like it was sacred. She brought life to the farm, humming as she worked, folding his shirts, picking apples by the fence. Gideon smiled more. One evening she carried in tomatoes, cheeks flushed. He was splitting wood by the barn. "You're low on kindling," she said. He nodded, just thinking that. Their eyes held. "Gideon," she said softly, "I never thought I'd feel safe again." He dropped the axe, stepped closer. "You are." "I know," she whispered. His hand grazed her cheek. She leaned into his kiss, slow and certain. When they parted, her eyes glistened. "You're not alone anymore," she said. He pressed his forehead to hers. "Neither are you." The sun sank behind the barn, golden light spilling over the fields, something rooted taking hold. Cooler days came, frost glazing the windows, the air sharp with wood smoke and drying corn. Geneva wore Gideon's old wool shirt under her apron. Sleeves rolled as she fed chickens or worked the kitchen. They moved together quietly. Her stitching grain sacks, him sharpening scythes. Their bond grew in glances and shared ease. One afternoon, Gideon brought a parcel from a neighbor's wagon. Unwrapping small leather gloves. "Traded for these," he said. "Sarah Dobbins made 'em for her boys once." Geneva traced the stitching. "Too fine for fields." "For winter wood cutting," he said. "Your hands red and easy, I noticed." She slipped them on, a perfect fit. "Never thought I'd have something made for me again." He stood still, fire crackling. "You deserve more." That night, as wind shook the shutters, Geneva pulled a worn book from her satchel, pages yellowed but cherished. "You read?" she asked. "Not lately." She held it up. "Pa kept this under the flour tin. Poems for Sundays, said words held you when nothing else could." By the hearth, her voice softened, reading lines that didn't always rhyme but carried memory. Gideon listened, her gentleness stirring something deep. When she stopped, she thumbed the page. "Pa said a quiet life's fine with someone to share it." "Miss him?" Gideon asked. "Every day," she said, "but it hurts less here." She didn't pull away when he took her hand. The next morning, a letter arrived by horseback. Geneva knelt in the garden, tugging the last carrots from the earth, when Gideon's voice carried from the porch. "Letter for you." She brushed dirt from her hands onto her apron and took the envelope, her fingers unsteady as she tore it open. Gideon stood close, studying her expression. "It's from Mrs. Elkins," Geneva said finally. "She runs the boarding house, says the sheriff was asking about me." Gideon stepped off the porch, his voice firm. "You're not in trouble." "No," she replied quickly. "But the man I ran from, he's back, asking questions. Claims I owe him for room and board, but I paid my dues. Mrs. Elkins backed me up." Gideon's jaw tightened. "He won't find you here." Geneva met his gaze. "I hope not, but I had to tell you." He nodded. "You did right." She folded the letter, slipping it back into the envelope. "I've always had to run before. That's how it's been. But I don't want to leave this time." Gideon's eyes softened. "You don't have to. Not unless you want to." Her gaze held steady, resolute. Winter crept in early, snow dusting the fields. They moved the livestock to the stone pens by the barn and stacked firewood under the porch eaves. The house felt warmer than ever. One evening, Geneva found a carved cedar box hidden behind the pantry shelves. Inside were fragments of Gideon's past, a faded tintype of his parents, a worn pocket knife, a muslin square with his mother's initials stitched in faded thread. Gideon leaned against the doorway, watching. "I'd nearly forgotten that was there." "I didn't touch anything," Geneva said. "I want you to," he replied. "It's yours now, too." She traced the muslin, then looked up. "I'd like to make curtains for the front room. There's fabric in town if we can trade for it." He nodded. "We'll go next week when the snow clears." Geneva closed the box carefully. "I was thinking we could stitch our initials in the hem." Gideon crossed the room, resting his hem over hers. "What else are you thinking?" "Things'll look up." "I'd stay for good, if you'll have me." He didn't speak, but leaned down, kissing her forehead, then her lips, slow and sure. Snow fell outside, but the hearth glowed warm, and something enduring took root within those walls. Spring arrived slowly, melting snow dripping from the eaves, softening the frozen ground. Geneva sewed pale blue linen curtains for the front room, stitching G and G in the corner. They shared the house without fanfare. Mornings, she tended the fire while he pulled on boots still damp from the day before. Evenings, they read or worked in quiet rhythm, their days shaped by choice, not flight. One morning, as Geneva stirred cornmeal into a pot, Gideon leaned against the door frame. "I've been thinking about the north pasture. Clear it by spring, we could plant fruit trees." She glanced up. "Apples? Maybe peaches too, if we're lucky." She stepped to the window, eyeing the frost-covered slope bathed in sunlight. "It'll take years to bear fruit." He shrugged. "I can wait." She turned to him, smiling faintly. "So can I." That week, they hitched the mare and drove the wagon into town, Geneva's first trip since fall. She wore a shawl pinned at her throat, hands clasped tightly as the wagon rattled over muddy ruts. Townsfolk glanced their way, curious but kind. At the mercantile, Gideon bartered eggs and a cured ham for flour, seed oats, and muslin. Geneva stood by the counter as the shopkeeper wrapped their goods. "Your Walker's girl?" the woman asked softly. Geneva nodded. "You should talk to Mrs. Fowler about the spring gathering, second Thursday each month. They'd welcome you." "I'll think on it," Geneva replied. Outside, loading the wagon, she kept her gaze down. Gideon helped her up gently, sensing her quiet unease. Halfway home, the mare shied at a fallen branch. Geneva grabbed Gideon's arm and he steadied her. "You okay?" She nodded, then spoke. "I've left places before. Always meant to stay, but people made it hard." His eyes stayed on her. "This place won't turn you out." She hesitated. "I don't know how to belong somewhere like this. Never stayed long enough to learn." He squeezed her hand. "You're not learning alone." By March, the creek ran strong, and the hens laid steadily. Geneva worked the side garden, turning soil with a hoe, her skirts tied up. Gideon watched from the shed roof, patching shingles, sunlight glinting in her hair. That night, shelling beans by lamplight, she asked, "Ever think about children?" He paused. "Used to imagine a house full of them." She studied the beans in her palm. "I never saw myself as a mother, but I'm starting to wonder what it would be like." He looked at her. "Think we'd be any good at it?" "I think we'd try. That's what counts." He reached for her hand, their calloused palms meeting. Spring rushed in, bright and wet. They dug post holes for the orchard, cleared roots and marked rows. Geneva painted a sign for the gate. Walker Homestead. No one asked her to. One evening, as dusk turned the sky lavender, Gideon returned from outside with a small walnut box. He handed it to Geneva. Inside was a simple silver ring, worn smooth. He knelt, the floorboards creaking. "I've only got my hands and this land to give." Geneva slipped the ring on, her answer unspoken but clear. In the quiet of a late spring evening, Gideon slipped a simple band onto Geneva's finger. "If you stay, if you'll be mine," he said, voice low, "I'll spend my days making sure you never doubt where you belong." Geneva's breath hitched, her fingers brushing the ring. "I've belonged here since I woke in your field," she whispered. "Yes," he said, their foreheads touching as the lamp flickered. Outside, frogs sang again, and the house, once hollow, felt warm, alive. "Outside," she said, her voice hollow, felt warm, alive. Their future wasn't built on grand gestures, but on the steady choice to stay, to hold fast through loss and love. By summer, when wild violets crept along the fence, Geneva took to the ledger, her neat script tracking seed costs, feed deliveries, and nails Gideon traded for in town. Each Friday she handed him the book and he'd review it under lamplight. One evening he looked up. "Ever thought about a cow?" She nodded. "Been mulling it over. Milk, butter, maybe cream to trade if we manage well." He set the ledger down. "The Morgans have a heifer, born last year, might be ready to calve." She pulled her shawl tight. "We'll visit Sunday. I'll bake something." That Sunday they crossed the ridge, boots wet with dew. Geneva carried oat biscuits in a tin. The Morgans sent them home with eggs nestled in her apron. "They liked you," Gideon said, watching her adjust her shawl. "They liked the biscuits," she replied, her eyes bright with something new. At the orchard's edge, where stakes marked new trenches, Geneva paused, toeing the soil. "I've never stayed long enough to see a tree grow." Gideon's hand grazed her back. "You will now." That spring brought more than planting. Word spread of a preacher from Council Grove, marrying couples by the riverbank. Mrs. Fowler brought the news with a basket of thread. When Geneva told Gideon, he set down the bridle he was oiling. "Want a proper wedding?" "Just the vows," she said. "To name what we already know." He nodded. "Then we'll go." They arrived early, wagon lined with a wool blanket and corn muffins for the tables. Geneva wore a dress with fresh lace, her hair braided tight, as her mother once taught her. The preacher's voice was steady under a cottonwood. When their turn came, they stepped forward, hands sure. Afterward, beyond the crowd, Gideon asked, "You all right?" "It feels real now," Geneva said. Like the land knows, they returned home by dusk, the kitchen lantern glowing low. That night, Geneva lit the fire. Gideon unhitched the wagon. In the doorway, she took his hand and held it. Under the quilt she'd pieced that winter, she said, "I want to build something lasting. Not just for us, for what comes after." Gideon brushed her knuckles. "Then we will." They planned a second henhouse and a smokehouse by the barn. Geneva scratched ideas on a kitchen wallboard. Half thoughts for Gideon to find. One evening he read her latest, Schoolhouse. She looked up from slicing potatoes. "Talk of one near the river fork. For later if we need it." He kissed her temple. "We will." That night, wind shook the old maple, and Gideon checked the door's latch. Geneva lifted the blanket for him, no words needed. The house held roots now, not echoes. Summer draped golden light across the land. The orchard trees, staked with cedar and twine, grew under Geneva's watchful eye. She measured their progress with quiet pride, certain they'd bloom in time. Gideon believed her. They ate supper under the barn's lean-to, where the breeze cooled and light lingered. One evening, over a bowl of peas and onions, Geneva asked, "You ever think about your mother?" Gideon paused. "Sometimes. She died before the war. I remember her hands." always working. Geneva tugged a thread on her sleeve. Mine hummed the same tune, always. I can't recall it fully, but I want to. He touched her hand. It's in you, perfect or not. They ate in the evening's hush. Later that week, they travelled to the county's edge where the Haskells sold dairy stock. The trail was rutted, the sun fierce. Geneva's straw hat, ribbon frayed, shaded her face. They chose a calm-eyed cow, brown and white, and the Haskells added a pail and halter. Geneva promised butter by autumn. On the way home, she leaned against the wagon rail, the cow trailing behind. Never thought I'd pick livestock, she said. You pick what matters, Gideon replied. That night, she milked the cow, hands steady. Gideon held the lantern. I'll build her a stall before winter, he said. Name her, Geneva said, glancing at the cow. Ida, after my aunt, stubborn, sweet. July deepened, and Geneva walked the garden's edge before dawn, hoe in hand. Gideon sometimes joined, passing tools in silence. One morning, under the cedar by the grain shed, she rested, hands on her middle. I'm feeling different, she said. Off balance, hungry. He took her hand, concern in his eyes. You sure? I think I'm carrying, she said. His grip tightened. You want this? I do, she whispered. Then I'll do, he said, voice thick. More than anything. They didn't dwell on it. The months wove together like thread. Each day a careful stitch. Gideon strengthened the porch. Geneva dried herbs above the stove. They built a pine cradle, sanded smooth, lined with flannel scraps. As fall painted the leaves rust and gold, Geneva's belly rounded. She moved slower but worked on, humming as she boiled preserves. Gideon watched her closely, ensuring she rested. 8. One afternoon she sat on the porch, a basket in her lap. I made something, she said, showing a swaddling cloth stitched with blue wildflower. Gideon held it gently. They'll have more than cloth, he said. They'll have a home. Winter brought the birth, quiet and early, snow falling thick. Geneva laboured with fierce resolve, gripping Gideon's hand. By sunrise, their daughter, pink and loud, arrived. She's got your chin, Geneva whispered, hair damp. Looks like you, Gideon said, kneeling. They named her Lynn. The house filled with new sounds, cries, lullabies, tiny nails on wood as Lynn crawled. Gideon built her a small bench. Geneva taught her plants and stars. The orchard bore fruit when Lynn turned 4. Geneva picked an apple, handed it to Gideon, and bit her own. You were right, she said, the juice dripping. About waiting. He kissed her, Lynn's laughter ringing behind them. They never left that land. Home wasn't just the house, trees, or fields. It was the life they built, the love they chose, the way they returned to each other, season after season, steady as roots.